All right, ladies and gentlemen, my special guest, another special guest tonight is Scott Ritter. He is a former UN weapons inspector. You've seen him here before. Welcome, Scott. Welcome back.
The way you said on time, and you sounded so surprised. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming back on. Oh my gosh. Okay, Scott, I have to start with this clip from Marco Rubio. So for people who have not seen this, let me go ahead and bring this up here. When the Russians landed in Alaska, they were there to refuel. People have to hear this, what Marco Rubio said. I guess he was basically saying like Russia depends on American resources.
Again, every single sanction that was in place on the day he took over remained. And the impact of all those sanctions remain. You know, when the Russians landed in Alaska, they were there to refuel. They had to offer to pay in cash to refuel their airplanes because they can't use our banking system. They face consequences every single day. But the bottom line is that has not altered the direction of this war. That doesn't mean those sanctions are inappropriate. It means it hasn't altered the outcome of it. And here's what we do think is important, and that is that we end this war. To end this war, you have to be able to engage with the Russians. As much as people may not like it, as distasteful as people may find it, the only way to end this war is to get the Russians to agree, as well as the Ukrainians, but the Russians to agree to a peace deal. And the minute you issue new sanctions, your ability to get them to the table, our ability to get them to the table, will be severely diminished. That moment may arrive. But when it comes, what you're basically signaling is there is no opportunity for peace at this point. So just let's put on more sanctions and allow more people to get bombed and more people to be killed. And that's what we're trying to stop.
Okay, Scott, I believe you were just in Europe recently.
Russia, not Europe.
In Russia. Okay. So Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump met in Alaska, and some people believe that this was going to be a pathway towards either a ceasefire or a peace negotiation. And from what I understand, I never thought that was going to be possible from that meeting because of the territory, which we can get into a little bit later. But this idea of the sanctions, what Marco Rubio is discussing, is Russia depending on U.S. resources? Because like I said, from what I understand, like Russia seems to be doing pretty well, regardless of the sanctions that were put on them.
Russia's doing quite well. Their economy is growing. The cities are clean. The stores are full. The people are happy. Marco Rubio, frankly speaking, doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. The United States has put a whole bunch of sanctions on that are meaningless. Yeah, okay. Big victory, Marco. You denied Russia access to U.S. banks, so they paid in cash. That's just a symbol of your stupidity, because the dollars they paid you with and the fact that you kicked them out of the U.S. banking system means they're going to de-dollarize. So there'll be one day, Marco, when your airplane lands in a foreign country and they won't accept dollars. And you're going to have to go to the cash exchange and exchange whatever currency is. This is how stupid Marco Rubio is. This is how stupid everybody who advises this president is about Russia. Nothing we have done works. Nothing. Moreover, it just shows, and I'll just tell you right now, nothing the U.S. says about Russia is true. All the spin about we're going to talk about land. I'm here to tell you right now, whatever you heard from the Western media, just isn't true. You need to know some basic facts about Russia. And once you know the basic facts about Russia, the truth shall set you free. But nobody wants to know about Russia. Everybody, we've been infected with Russophobia. Everybody believes in this anti-Russian narrative. Meanwhile, we sing high praises to, a cocaine sniffing idiot who runs Ukraine. And I don't say that lightly. I normally don't get into name calling, but the man has clearly got a drug problem. We know he snorted coke when he ran for president. We know he snorted coke after he became president. Is he snorting coke now? Probably, because he's an addict. He's under a lot of stress. And you've seen the videos. You know what I'm talking about. So, this is just sad right now. There will be no ceasefire. Never was going to be a ceasefire. That's a unilateral U.S. demand that Russia said, hell no. There will be an end to this conflict. But if Zelensky wants to play stupid, look what Russia just did last night. Knocked the living crap out of him without even trying. Russia could do that any night it wants to, every night it wants to. And at some point in time, the gloves are going to come off, and Russia's going to level the place and start killing a whole bunch more Ukraine. The 1.8 million Ukrainian soldiers have died so far. That's a number the West doesn't want you to know about.
So I also found it interesting that Ukraine striked Russia right before or right when Vladimir Putin was leaving to go to Alaska. And of course, corporate media didn't want to talk about it from that perspective. But the moment that I guess Russia fired back, it was, oh my God, look at Russia. They're attacking Ukraine. How dare they do this? But they admitted the fact that Ukraine went after them when Putin went to Alaska. Do you think that this meeting with Trump and Putin was all for show?
No, it's not for show. It's for real. You see, the Ukraine conflict is nothing. It really is nothing. Improving U.S.-Russian relations is everything. I wish people would get it through their thick skulls. This time last year, there's a better than 50% chance the United States was going to go to nuclear war with Russia by the end of the year. That's not me saying it, although I agree. It was the CIA's assessment. The Biden administration stated straight up they're ready for a nuclear conflict with Russia. Rear Admiral Buchanan, when briefing their readiness to a think tank in Washington, D.C., said, we're ready to hook and jab. Let's do it. Then he said, we should probably be more honest to the American people about what that means. Because even though we say we win, life will never be the same. Everything you think you have will not be. So that's what Trump's talking about here. He has a bigger picture in mind, trying to avoid nuclear war, trying to avoid World War III, trying to avoid a situation where we get into a multi-trillion dollar arms race that we can't afford. I just landed at JFK Airport, a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. Driving in from JFK into Albany, this isn't the first world country. We live in a third world country. I've been to third world countries that have better infrastructure than we do. So, why? Because we spend all our money on stuff that doesn't work, on preparing for war. I mean, someone made an interesting observation. The United States and NATO combined account for 55% of the world's defense. They're being beaten by Russia. So, Trump gets it. He understands that we have to get out of this madness, because if this continues, then we'll be in a situation where we allow Europe to dictate the terms of Armageddon, and no American should want that.
What do you think about, because this is, I think there's been a lot of back and forth, and a lot of people are saying, well, Russia is going to have to give up territory. But Vladimir Putin has been corporate media. Corporate media.
Yeah, but all Western. And I'll make another observation. None of them know a damn thing about Russia. End of story.
Right. And so my whole thing is I'm like, are they not hearing the same things that I heard? Like, Vladimir Putin was very clear about what his demands were. And now you have Zelensky. I want to show people this because Zelensky made his way back to the White House. And I thought you'd find this pretty funny, Scott. He made sure to wear a suit this time. So I guess he saw some of the comments that people made, and they said, don't show up to the White House not wearing a suit. He put on a suit. But listen to what he said here. He's trying to, I guess, sweet talk his way to Donald Trump.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, adopted children, and my wife, First Lady of Ukraine. She gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
I want it.
Yeah. So we're saying this sensitive topic. Yeah. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners, and that you supported this format. That after our meeting, we can have leaders who are around us, UK and France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean, all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks them, and thank you very much for invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
So I thought you'd find that interesting. That was him trying to kiss up to Donald Trump, because remember his last experience here when Trump told him you don't have any cards to play, and the fact that he didn't show up wearing that sweater this time, and he actually put on a blazer or whatever. But this isn't a laughing game. Like, this isn't a joke. Like, what exactly does Zelensky expect to happen at this point in time?
I don't know. He's been coddled by Europe, who talks tough, but at the end of the day, every time Europe talks tough, they always stop with the same observation: we must have U.S. backup. They don't have U.S. backup. I mean, the statement out of the Trump administration is clear: the U.S. is out of the direct support to Ukraine game. What has to happen now is that if Ukraine wants U.S. weapons, Europe has to buy these weapons and then send them to the Ukrainians. I mean, Zelensky's talking about 10 Patriot baddies. sorry, Z. You wouldn't see the first one of those until 2028, 2029. Last time I checked the calendar, it's 2025, and your army's getting routed on the battlefield. This is just a tragic joke. You talked about land. Let me just make it very clear to everybody. Vladimir Putin has no authority whatsoever to make a land deal. Please understand that. He's not a dictator. People don't get it. Russia's a democracy. They have a constitution, just like we do. And the constitution, sets limits. Vladimir Putin can't snap his fingers and make things happen. Should he try, he would be kicked out of office. How can you kick Vladimir Putin out of office? He's a dictator. No, he's a president, just like our president. And the Constitution forbids it. It's Mother Russia. And, these territories, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, have been absorbed by Russia constitutionally in their totality. Vladimir Putin can't draw a line across the map and say, this goes to you, this goes to me. He's never said that. What he has said is that if you want to bring an end to the killing, get out of all of the Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk, we'll stop the fighting in Kherson and Zaporizhia, and then we'll have a comprehensive peace plan in which you'll get your ass out of our territory and you'll shrink your military, demilitarization, and we're going to denazify you, and we're going to get rid of Zelensky. People are missing the whole point that all Trump's trying to talk to right now is an end to the fighting. The comprehensive peace deal, Putin has never, ever wavered on what he's going to do. And Trump is out there saying, no, we'll allow European troops. Putin won't. And since he has the only vote that counts, we sort of know what's going to happen. The U.S. has no cards. I mean, let's just pull the thing the U.S. talks about Zelensky. U.S. has no cards. What cards are we going to play? Sanctions? Russia could care less. The more we sanction Russia, the more we unite BRICS. The stupidity of what we did with India proves it.
Why does the West call him a dictator?
Because they're stupid, because they're ignorant, because they're dumber than dirt. They call him a dictator because the West was satisfied with Russia. Remember, the great democracy that they want to go back to is the Yeltsin democracy. Yeltsin was a dictator, straight up dictator, put into power by the United States. I just want to remind people that in 1993, October 3rd, I believe, Boris Yeltsin filled the streets of Moscow with tanks. Why? He declared war on the Russian parliament. And those tanks fired into the parliament, and Russian troops stormed the parliament. Some democracy Russia has there. And then what did we do? We sought to solidify his hold on power by trying to steal an election in 1994 to run, to get a new parliament. Failed miserably. And then 1996, we bought Boris Yeltsin a re-election. And there it is, democracy, American style. Vladimir Putin came in, was appointed by Boris Yeltsin as his replacement on New Year's Eve, 1999. He had to run for president, because there has to be an election. He won the office of presidency in March of 2000 with 51-point-something% of the vote. Let me tell you something about dictatorships. I've been in a couple. They don't win elections by 51%. They win elections by 98%, 99%, because Vladimir Putin is not a dictator. He's a man who has dragged Russia out of the hole that the West created in the 1990s to a Russia today that stands on its own 2 feet, proud of who they are. That's why they call him a dictator, because he won't surrender, because he won't bend the knee, because he won't play their game. We can't handle the fact that Russia has a functioning democracy, and that the Russian people are pretty satisfied with the leader they have. His support rating right now is 85%. 85%.
That's the part.
Find me.
That's the part. Oh, I was just gonna say that's the part they don't tell you what his approval rating is.
85%, straight up. Why? And this is during war. This is during war. We're saying, see, Russia actually has populated people that love their country, are proud of being Russians. They look around and say, we're pretty cool. We do okay. They have strong family values. I know that that's not the thing we push here in the United States, but the Russians have strong family values. They are old school on a whole bunch of stuff. They stand together. They're people united, and we can't handle it. So rather than tell the truth to the American people, we have a whole bunch of people in power today who are advised by people who literally have gone through PhD, mass production facilities in these higher institutes like Stanford. All you have to do to get a PhD in Stanford is write a thesis on how bad Vladimir Putin is. You may think I'm joking. I'll go through the resumes of all the top CIA, National Intelligence Officer, people on the National Security Council, every single one. Sabby, I've done this. Every single one of them has got a doctorate called Vladimir Putin's a dictator. He's not. They shouldn't have gotten their doctorate. They should have their doctorates revoked. But this is what Russophobia has done. Nobody understands Russia. Nobody understands Russia. You have to travel to Russia to understand Russia. That's why I like traveling to Russia, so I can understand Russia. Doesn't mean that I'm, a toady of Vladimir Putin, but see, people can't handle the truth. The moment I say the truth, they can't contradict me with facts. So they say, oh, he's a Putin's puppet, or he's, the Russians have bought him out. Well, you can't say that anymore because the $200 article contract I had with RT ain't anymore because of the sanctions. But I guess if you're going to say that I was a Russian stooge for getting paid $200 for an article, what does that make me when I write for the American Conservative? A neocon stooge? What happens when I write for Truth Dig? I'm a liberal stooge. See the stupidity of people?
Well, Scott, you were in Russia recently. What is the sentiment there among the people?
They want peace. But here's the other thing you won't be told. They know who started this war. See, they're aware of their history. We're not. We like to have people say the war started on February 24th, 2022, when Russian troops entered Ukraine. Nobody talks about the fact that on February 14th, 2022, the Ukrainians began their offensive against the Donbass. They started firing artillery shells 10 times greater than what they had done before. They began the artillery preparation. They were scheduled to invade with 80,000 NATO-trained Ukrainian soldiers on around March 6th. The Russians had this information. They were telling the West, don't let the Ukrainians mass their troops. Everybody in the West saw trainloads of Ukrainian armor and everything moving towards the Donbass. The Russians said no. They preempted it. But that's not really. How about 2014, when the U.S. CIA back, remember Victoria Nuland, John McCain with the cookies? Remember Victoria Nuland with the phone call? And our man Yats, we handpicked the leadership, but we don't know about the CIA's ongoing relationship with the Ukrainian nationalists, the Azov, the Nazis. 2014, when we unconstitutionally removed an elected president and then replaced him with Western nationalist stooges, who then turned around on April 14th and declared a terrorist operation against their fellow citizens. I
think Scott froze.
I think we're back.
Okay.
I just finished a week talking to people who live in Lugansk, Donetsk, and when they speak about 2014, we have no clue what happened here. It's like you living in your neighborhood, and one morning just having, I don't know what part of Boston, you don't have to tell me what part of Boston from, but let's say suddenly the Southeast started firing artillery into your neighborhood. And like you're going shopping and your market blows up and you're like, what the hell's going on? The Southeast are mad at me. And they're starting to shell you. They're calling you terrorists. And you're like, wait a minute, what? And then they start bring the tanks in. And you do a demonstration, they start shooting you. They call you a terrorist. You say, well, but we're all from Boston. Not anymore. Not anymore, you're not. The Ukrainians called the Russians terrorists. You were criminalized for speaking the Russian language. You were criminalized for being a Russian Orthodox. You were criminalized for respecting the reality of history, to say, oh my, we praise the Soviets for kicking the Nazis out of our territory. Oh, not unless you're a Western Ukrainian ultranationalist who fought side by side with the Nazis. This is all real stuff that we in the West don't get. The murder that was taking place. I interviewed this wonderful lady. She's 31 now, so you subtract the time, that tells you she was early 20s. She was a volunteer, and she's the one who went in and rescued the children. The children in the village that got shelled by the Ukrainians, where the parents are dead and the children are sitting there wounded, nobody to help, and the Ukrainians keep shelling. She's the one who ran into the building. She's the one who got the children out, removed them. She's the one who went to Kiev, to Poroshenko, and said, hey, we had these children we rescued from the villages. Can we bring them up to an orphanage in Kiev? And he said no. And then she tried to take him out to Europe, but she was called a terrorist by the Ukrainians. Left them no choice. They evacuated the children to Russian children's camps where they were given medical care, food, and all that. And now she's charged with kidnapping. Remember when Ursula von der Leyen just sat there, Mr. President, you have to return the children? I wanted to slap that lady so hard. I would never hit a woman, but I'm just telling you, the truth about what happened. The truth about what happened is unknown in the West. We just buy the Ukrainian crap. You know what happens to children who do get evacuated out of the orphanages or out of blown up buildings to Ukraine? Over 60% of them either get sold into child sex trade or organ trafficking. That's
oh my God.
Oh, don't say, oh my God, Sabby, it happens, and everybody knows it happens. It's right there in front of them. They stop the cars every day going into Romania with the children in there. The organs get caught. They found the bodies in the child organ harvesting factories. This is the reality of Ukraine. It's a disgusting nation full of disgusting people who commit the most horrific crimes, and we back them up with our taxpayer dollars, and we call the Russians criminal. This is the truth. But no American wants to hear the truth. No American wants to hear the fact that Mayor Klitschko, the mayor of Ukraine, the boxer, oh, he's a great guy, he's a boxer. He runs 5 whorehouses that basically traffic underage Ukrainian girls who've been kicked out of their homes and have no place to go. And you know who frequents these whorehouses? All the Western terrorists who go over there to fight for the Ukrainians. Well, they call themselves mercenaries or freedom fighters. Do the research, Sabby. It's so obvious. These guys go there, they get drunk, and they go hang out in Klitschko's whorehouses, and they, and we just let it happen. And then they come home and we treat them like heroes. Oh, you fought the Russians. Oh, did you kill a Russian? Well, they might have killed a Russian. It's a pretty violent war. But they did more than that, Sabby. They did more than that. The Ukrainian government is a corrupt government. Zelensky is the mastermind of it. He steals so much money, it's not even funny. I mean, Seymour Hersh reported at one point in time that the director of the CIA had to go over there and tell him to stop stealing so much money because it became too obvious. They estimate he funnels billions of dollars a month into his private account outside of Ukraine. That's our taxpayer dollars that we send there. This is the fundamentally most corrupt place in the world. And then you go to Russia and you just find some of the most fundamentally decent people in the world. I mean, does Russia have bad people? Sure. Everybody has bad people. But the Russians clean up their bad people. The Russians admit their mistakes. The Russians are fundamentally good people. They are fundamentally good people. And what this war has done to some of these really good people is look, I'm not saying there's not good Ukrainians. Of course there are. And I'm not saying that it's, the vast majority of the Ukrainian soldiers that died are just good boys who were put in a bad situation. But the guys behind them, the Azov, the Kraken Battalion, the Adar Battalion, the guys that run the line so that you can't retreat, they shoot you if you retreat. These are bad guys. One of these guys is on video laughing because when they recaptured a territory that the Russians had held in 2022 outside of Kharkov, they basically took all the Russian speakers they found and executed them. And he said they're going to have to do a whole new census when this is done because we've killed everybody and they'll never find the bodies. I mean, he's just bragging about it. And we know this is happening.
I'm going to tell you, Scott, a lot of people don't know. Like even when I try to tell people about, and I've gotten into many arguments with people about this, and by people, I mean people, outside of, YouTube world, but like just people, friends of mine and stuff. I've gotten into several arguments about them. When I try to tell them about the Nazification of Ukraine, they are really taken aback. Like, what do you mean? Putin's evil. Russia's a bad place. And I'm like, look it up. And then I'll like send them links, and then they get mad because I send them links to look at the information. I'm like, you wanted to see, this is the proof right here. You can see it for yourself. But it's like Americans get freaked out. And I don't know if it's just because they feel like, oh my God, that means that everything that I've been told about this can be a lie. And they don't really know how to take it. But I don't think they realize, like, I know there's corruption in Ukraine, but even for me, like some of the story, even what you just said there about what's happening with the children, like, I didn't know that part of it, but I'm just saying that, like, I don't think a lot of Americans know.
But they don't want to know because it's there right in front of their face. I'll give you an example. There's a guy named Gary Tabak, former, U.S. Navy captain, the first Soviet-born Russian to be commissioned in the U.S. Navy, and all this stuff. And when he retired from the Navy, he went to Ukraine and he started working for Azov. I mean, he would do a podcast, and right in his back, he's got the Azov flag. And he's got all the machine guns from the freedom fighters of Azov. These were the terrorists who were killing hundreds of thousands of Russians and Poles. Look, the story of what Azov or what the Banderas did is crazy. Nobody wants to hear it, but they do it to this day. They glorify it. 60 miles away from my house, right here in Ellenville, New York, there's a Banderas summer camp where they train generations of Ukrainian American children who carry the poster of Stepan Bandera with the torches singing Stepan Bandera is my father. And they take an oath that says that the loyalty to Bandera is above all else. And these are American citizens. So they're taking a low oath right here, Sabby. They run 3 camps a year. They cycle them through. They have Heroes Hill, Stepan Bandera's face right there, along with, some of the other great murderers, people. These are people who killed 130,000 Poles. When they went into the Polish villages, or when they went, they'd surround the villages, and they go into one house at a time and literally butcher the family alive in front of each other. And they surrounded the house with a female choir that would sing songs to drown out the sounds of the screams so that other people wouldn't panic. This is the reality of the Banderas, and they're that way today. They do the same thing today. When they went into Kursk, and they invaded, and everyone was like, oh, good, look, the Ukrainians invaded Kursk. The villages they captured, the old people couldn't leave, because they're old and they didn't get the word. They butchered them all. The Russians, when they recaptured it, and I've spoken to the Russian soldiers. They've shown me the videos. When they went down the basements, raped women, raped teenagers, raped children, men, clearly butchered. And then they catch the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians are stupid. When these guys who commit the crimes, they film them. They put them on their phones. And
that sounds familiar.
And so when the one Ukrainian soldier gets shot and the Russians have his phone, they not only know this guy, but they look at all the other faces. And then when they start capturing Ukrainians, they bring them in and go, so you're the guy over here who was this guy raping this girl and all this stuff. Because all the Ukrainians, when they get captured, I was forcefully mobilized. No, you volunteered. I have it on the phone where you're singing the song over and over and over again. Horrific war crimes, but we pretend that it doesn't happen, and we cover it up with, Putin's a dictator. Vladimir Putin's not a dictator. I've watched how he's governed for 25 years. It's the least dictatorial style you'll ever see in your life. It's different than us because he actually goes and talks to governors, sits down with them and has a meaningful conversation. He listens, he absorbs, and then, he will put out orders, but this man is, I just wish our leaders would operate this way.
I mean, it's a lot, I think, to process. And we were talking about the territories, and I just wanted to show you this because someone posted this. It says, according to rumors, this is the proposed agreement. And it says Ukraine banned from joining NATO and must declare neutrality. Ukraine withdraws from Kursk. European and UK soldiers police demilitarized buffer zone. Frontline frozen and Easter ceasefire that was April 20th. And then here, Kyiv accepts Russian sovereignty and annexed land. Does that sound right to you?
Nope, no NATO troops will ever be allowed on Ukrainian soil.
Mm.
And the EU, Russia doesn't trust them. And the other thing is there won't be any frozen conflict. Again, I don't know how to say this. Putin has no authority to give up Russian territory. None. Can't make that deal. It's legally impossible. Vladimir Putin isn't going to sit there and negotiate with the president, and betray the Duma, the people's deputies. He'll be eviscerated for that. So, Vladimir Putin, for 25 years, he's a man who has obeyed the law assiduously. The Constitution is absolute. If you don't like the Constitution, then you go through the whole process of, a referendum to, alter the Constitution, which he last did, I think, in 2020. But again, it's not like he started breaking it and then said, "Oh, we're going to cover it up." The first thing you do is you have to have the referendum. It has to be law. It has to be signed into law. The State Duma has to approve it, and then you can act on it as long as it's constitutional. He can't negotiate away the land. I don't know how to make this any clearer to everybody. So just stop believing this crap coming out of the West. Vladimir Putin is incapable of making any of the deals that anybody in the West is talking about because he's the Russian president bound by the Russian Constitution. End of story.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to have you on to talk about this, because there's a lot of things that are being said, of course, by the Trump administration about Russia and Ukraine, and then of course about Western media. And they're, of course, they're all pinning this on Vladimir Putin. They're all pinning it on Russia. Donald Trump did come forward in a phone call with Fox News that I saw earlier, where he did say that he still blames Ukraine for starting the war.
Well, it is Ukraine's fault. But Donald Trump has said 3 times this year, once in January, once in February, once in April, that NATO expansion is what started this war too. He said, if Ukraine hadn't tried to join NATO, then this war wouldn't have happened. True statement. Absolute true statement.
Do we need a NATO? Like I've been saying this for quite a while, abolish NATO. Do we have to have a NATO?
Well, I mean, it exists. It's hard to undo 80 years of, I don't know what they're up to now. Not 80 years, but 70 some odd years of precedent. NATO was always an artificial construct. I mean, if people want to get down to the beginning of NATO, just look at how Germany was brought in. The whitewashing of their Nazi crimes so that Nazi officers and soldiers could, help beef up the NATO strength. But if you want to say NATO was there to contain the Soviet Union, prevent Soviet, some theoretical Soviet advance on the West, okay. But when the Cold War ended, that's it. There shouldn't have been a NATO. It should go away. If Europe wanted a consolidated, united military thing, then it should be a European army and a European alliance. But there's no reason for the United States to be playing this game that we are. But we use NATO. Let's go up and study the Gulf War or the lead up to the invasion of 2003. We purposefully expanded NATO so that we could split Europe. Donald Rumsfeld spoke about old Europe and new Europe. And we used new Europe, the Poles, the Balts, and everybody else as leverage against old Europe. But NATO atrophied. I mean, today there's not a single army in NATO worthy of the name. I mean, I had to laugh when you showed those British flags on there. You could put all the British Army in a soccer stadium in downtown London, and you have about 30,000 empty seats. That's how small it is. And they're not well trained. They've got some training, but you know, training's expensive. Their aircraft carriers, they have two. They have to be towed every now and then because they just don't have any spare parts. It's pathetic. The British are pathetic. The Poles were talking big until they realized they had 14 days worth of ammunition. Then they realized at day 14, whatever soldiers were left that the Russians didn't kill would surrender because they had no ammo. France can't deploy anybody anywhere. I mean, I always laugh. We're going to send French troops in. No, you're not. Even if you wanted to, even if you had them, you can't deploy them and you can't sustain them. So it's all just fantasy. Germany, 16% of the Germans wouldn't defend Germany if it was invaded. I mean, 16% would. That means 84%. 84% of Germans, when polled, said, no, we're not willing to die for our country, even if somebody invades us. Constitutionally, the Germans have to have volunteers to serve outside of Germany's borders. So the idea of Germany mobilizing an army and sending it off, I mean, you know, Merz is talking big, but the reality of Germany is they can't do anything. Europe has no viable military forces. And I will make the following prediction. If Europe went to war against Russia, Russia will destroy the totality of Europe using conventional forces because Europe has no air defense system, none. So it's a joke, literally, an absolute tragic joke. You know, there are three Ukrainian drone operators who were frustrated because they were, you know, Ukrainians pretty good at drone warfare. And on a number of occasions, they've stopped the Russians cold using drones. The Russians did because the Russians are perhaps the most adaptable military in the world. You know, they learn from their mistakes rapidly, and they sat back and they took a look. And they started collecting intelligence. They got the
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Get the pattern of life, and then they start killing. The most dangerous job right now in the Ukrainian army is drone operator. Life expectancy of none, because the second you start using drones, you get killed. So these three guys withdrew, and they did a video where they were, you know, mocking the West. They said, you know, you guys are talking about us withdrawing. At least we're fighting. He said, if you brought your NATO military today into this battlefield with your tactics and everything you do, you'd all be dead within days. And it's the truth. The way drone warfare is being fought today, the West just can't handle it, isn't ready for it. Even the United States Army, they did, you know, the U.S. Army in Europe just posted a video where, you know, some American soldiers really proud because he learned how to put a grenade on a drone and fly the drone over a place and drop the grenade on somebody. It's like, look what we can do. They were doing that on day one in this war. Today, you know, they strap high explosives on. They have fiber optic lines that can't be jammed, and they're blown. And they come. The Russians are flooding the zone. So are the Ukrainians when they can live. But you know, in America, I just have to laugh because I just know how the American military works. I can't imagine a situation where Lance Corporal said, "Sir, we'd like to go out today and we want to expend 10 drones in a realistic simulation of, you know, how we would use drones to support maneuver." I can imagine someone saying, "We ain't signing off on that. This drone is an accountable item. We're not going to let it out of the warehouse. You know, what do you mean you want to crash the drone?" "Well, we got to train as we fight, sir." "No, that's a $2,500 piece of equipment. I'm not going to let you crash it, but that's what it's designed for, sir." Nah. Russians are like, they got Russian citizens buying drones, put them in trucks and driving them to the front and giving them to the troops. They, you know, less and less now because the Russian government's finally stepped in. But, you know, the drone operators today, they just flood the zone. They'll throw them in there, bang them up, crash them, and that's the way it operates. It's very intensive. I just spoke to an officer who's, you know, I call him a good friend of mine, but he he was wounded severely by a Ukrainian drone. He just says, you know, he says, we were ready, you know, but one of them got through, you know, and I guess that was a bad day for us. You know, it's just the way the reality of the war is. Drones are everywhere. And once you hear that buzzing, you're screwed.
I want to show you something Hillary Clinton just said. You probably don't find it surprising, but this is about Trump's foreign policy, and everyone listen to what she says here.
I actually was encouraged by the events of the last several months. First of all, the NATO commitment by individual member states to increase their defense spending is very welcome. It's something that prior administrations have certainly sought, and I think it's great that we are seeing these commitments that now have to be followed through on. The willingness of European countries to support Ukraine, and by doing so, buy American weapons in order to provide them to the Ukrainians. I think all of that is a very good signal that there is beginning to be a better understanding, both by the president and the people around him, as well as by the leaders of our European allies, that there can be common ground amongst us. And the kind of dismissiveness that we saw in the first Trump administration has been replaced by a much more obvious working relationship to the good of European security, transatlantic security, and hopefully Ukrainian security. So I'm actually encouraged.
So that's Hillary Clinton there, who feels encouraged because, more money spent for the military industrial complex. So she's happy that, Trump has been given more weapons to Ukraine. She's happy that the wars are continuing. That's what I gathered from that message.
Except it's not. Nothing she said there was true. She listen to her caveat. They've committed to this, but now there has to be follow through. But Hillary, there won't be any follow through because all the smoke was blown straight up Trump's you-know-what by Europe. Yes, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It has to go through legislative processes. The legislators haven't approved this, and they won't. The increase in defense spending they're asking for, the percentages of GDP they're asking for, sometimes exceeds the total budget of the state. It just won't happen. This is the stupid. People just are stupid. They're stupid. They'll believe anything they hear. Oh, we've committed to 5%. Who committed? Some idiot at NATO told Trump that we're going to do that? Did Trump ask, show me the legislative paperwork? Show me where they passed that in the law. No, it isn't going to happen because in order to make it happen, you have to shut down social programs. You have to shut down Medicaid. You have to shut down whatever the hell they got going. Reduce pensions of their pensioners. So no. So
you said shut down You said shut down Medicaid?
For the British, for the Europeans. No vacations. They're getting rid of all that good European lifestyle. Is history. It's history because they're trying to create a military that doesn't need to exist. And then she said, and he showed this great thing about selling them weapons. I already told you, none of these weapons are going to be delivered to Ukraine. And think about the humiliation of Europe. Let's say Germany bought, hypothetically, a Patriot missile battery. And then under Trump's pressure, now is being told, give it to Ukraine. But the Germans say, well, we need one to replace it before we give this one away. And Trump says, get in line, buy one. The Germans say, but your production, if we get in line now, we won't get one for 3 years. Well, I guess you can't give that one to the Ukrainians then, can you? Not until 3 years is done. Ukraine isn't getting anything. And when it arrives, it dies because there's no air defense today. The Russians killed it all. And I just want to remind all the people out there that NATO gave Ukraine more air defense than NATO possesses. There's not a single place in NATO that was defended as well as Ukraine was, with a totally integrated air defense system. And the Russians beat it. That's how good they are, guys. The Russians beat it. They beat the best we got. And now NATO has nothing.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to ask about, because I see. Do you remember a country called Yugoslavia?
Yeah.
And you remember like Czechoslovakia?
Yeah.
Before the change, the name change and all that jazz, right?
Before it split up.
Ukraine is going to fall.
Yeah.
When Ukraine falls and their economy is just already done, but their economy is going to be ruined, what happens to the people who are left there? And what happens to that country?
No one cares except the Russians. That's the sad thing. The people that care are the Russians. I just attended a conference where the Russians are frustrated with Europe because they're destroying, from the Russian perspective, and it's a perspective backed by history. They say, from one tree comes different branches. And so from this one Slavic tree, you get Ukrainian branch and a Russian branch. They're the same thing. It's the same family. So the Russians are very, very unhappy about what's happening with Ukraine right now and in Ukraine. But what are they supposed to do? Let the Banderists continue to do what they do? Let NATO come in? Remember, NATO coming in wasn't about the defensive of Ukraine. It was about forward positioning offensive strike weapons that could strike into the Russian center in case of war. That's why the Russians were like, no, you'll never get in here. We'll never let you in here. But the Ukrainian people now, millions of them have fled the country. I don't want to be too graphic, but people have to understand the reality, what's going on here. If you go to Europe today and you go to the brothels, if you go to the streets, the number one streetwalker you find is a Ukrainian woman, because that's the only job she can hold. They're prostitutes, straight up. And the children, they're kicked out. They get no education. So that means if you got your beautiful little daughter that you took out with you, she's going to be a prostitute. The son is going to go into organized crime. Going to be a thug. That's it. That's what happens to the Ukrainians who leave the country. The Ukrainians who remain in the country, their genetic pool is being depleted. All the men are being killed. And the women are being sold as sex slaves in their own country. It's a sad state of affairs. I mean, Ukraine always had a problem with this. I remember as a UN inspector back in the 90s, when we first started doing the inspections, all of the bands that were playing in Bahrain were Filipino bands, and they were dedicated to making music, as opposed to, running sex trades on the side. Around 1996, they were replaced with these horrible Ukrainian Russian bands with girls overly made up. They couldn't sing, they couldn't play, but all the girls were prostitutes. They sang there, and then they went out and they sold themselves right on the spot. And there was just a rotation. These girls would come out into the Middle East to make money and go home. That's the reality of Ukraine. That's it. And it's a horrible reality.
This is the part of Sean Penn doesn't capture this in his documentary about Ukraine. It's like how do you not see these things? Not you.
They see it, and everybody goes over and does it.
Yeah,
they're liars because.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. Everybody goes to Ukraine knows what the truth is. It's right there in your face. So for you not to report it means that you're basically being paid money to cover up the truth and tell a lie. There's not an honest journalist today who operates in Ukraine. Because if there was, they'd be reporting this. But they don't. Every single journalist who's over to Ukraine is on the take, meaning being paid off by somebody to tell lies. And you know where they won't go? You know where they won't go? They won't go to the Donbass. They won't come in from the other side with the Russians. See, the Russians have a tendency to sort of let you go free as a journalist. I've been there. The Russians don't have people around you go, you can't do this. The Russian concern is don't die. It's dangerous. Don't die. We don't want you to die. We'd really like you to stay alive. But I need to talk to this person. Okay, we'll try and make that safe. But they make everybody available. And it's a complicated story in Ukraine. It's in Donbass. I mean, and the Russians, they're not hiding it. I mean, the people of Donetsk and Lugansk are frustrated. They were getting murdered, raped, and killed by the Ukrainians starting in 2014. And these are Russian speakers whose loyalty is to Russia. And for 8 years, they had to abide this war before Russia came in. And they're like, why did you wait so long? We're sitting here screaming for help. And
Uh-oh. Oh, I think Scott froze.
there we go. I'm back now. But I'm just saying they're screaming for help and Russia didn't come. And then when the Russians came in, the Russian military, made a lot of mistakes early on. And so there's a period of time in 2022, 2023, where the Russians would throw the Lugansk boys and the Donetsk boys into the front line first to do the fighting because they were more experienced. But these are kids that had already fought for 8 years. See, the Russians just came in. This is 3.5 years the Russians have been at war now. But for the people of Donetsk and Lugansk, it's over 15 years. 15 years of war. That means that there's sons who are fighting their father's war today. There's 3 generations of Ukrainians for people in the Donbass who fought this conflict. It's a never-ending conflict for them. And and they're desperate for victory. They want this war to end, but they want this war to end forever. They don't want a ceasefire that then leads up. These villages, these territories are destroyed by this war. But just look at Mariupol, the city of Mariupol, and how it's been rebuilt by Russia. This city was leveled. You saw the videos back in 2022 when the fighting was done in May, June of 2022. Leveled. I've been there. Leveled. The Russians have come in and they've rebuilt it. They're cleaning up. It's not totally rebuilt yet. There's still a lot because they destroyed the entire city, but it's being rebuilt and it's beautiful now. And the Russians are going to do that with everything. They've made it a pledge. But this fighting that's going on is bloody and violent. And they're still killing children. Women go to the market in Donetsk. I was in Donetsk, and I have to tell you, it's sort of uncanny because it's like Russian roulette. It's a city, you're just living your life, and every once in a while the Ukrainians say, screw it, we're just going to fire into the city blindly. Or they know where they're firing. Oh, there's a market. We know right now all the mothers are at the market with their children buying bread. So let's blow up the market. And so a mother will be sitting there buying bread, buying eggs to cook. Boom, 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 boom. Suddenly there are a whole bunch of dead people. It's just random. The Ukrainians will just randomly fire a shell into Donetsk. Now it's drones. They just point to drones and tell them to go, and they crash into whatever they crash into, and it's just purely random. So you just live your life, and all of a sudden, boom, and I get up in the morning, and you just hear it, boom, 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 every single moment. There's an explosion taking place. It's getting better now because the Russians have been pushing the Ukrainians out, but back in late 2023, early 2024, the Ukrainians are right there. But nobody talks about it, about the actual criminality of everything Ukraine does, everything they do, and they use our weapons. Imagine being the Russian. And I talked to a guy. He's like, I hear you, Scott, and I respect you, Scott, but you're an American, Scott, and I just came from a village in Lugansk where we had to bury a family that was killed by a HIMARS shell fired by Ukrainians using American intelligence. Why did they fire into that building of civilians? Because they want to commit terror. The Ukrainians are a terrorist entity. The entire nation is people still ignore this. They can wrap people to poles in Ukraine. Saran wrap them, and then they take this green dye and they rub it on their face because they want to say you're an orc. And then the people just walk by and it happened.
I saw those videos. I also saw the videos of them throwing men into unmarked vans to make them go fight, like just pulling them off the street. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And one more question for you, Scott. So obviously, as we're looking at the numbers, like Vladimir Putin has a high approval rating among people in Russia. They do have elections. Zelensky, from what I understand last time, is not holding elections. So how do they win? Because I would say, well, they can just vote him out, but Zelensky said no elections.
No elections. And then what Zelensky's doing right now in order to get elections is he's purging all the opposition. He's buying people off. He's removing people from office. But this is one of the things that the Russians have said. They said, look, even if we wanted to make peace on any terms, we can't make peace with him because he has no authority. Anything Zelensky signs has no legal authority. We can't sign a peace treaty with him. There has to be an election, or the Ukrainians have to bring forward the Speaker of the Rada, the parliament, who's constitutionally mandated to take over from a president if the Constitution isn't followed. And Zelensky has illegally suspended elections under this excuse. Everybody in the West is like, oh, you can't hold an election during a war. Gosh, last time I checked, it was McClellan versus Lincoln, 1864. That was a civil war. He had an election. Franklin Delano Roosevelt got elected. Remember that one? 1944, won that election. I think we're at war then too. Oh, you can have elections at war. Everybody has elections at war, except the Ukrainians, because Zelensky is a dictator.
Scott, thank you so much for coming on. What else do you have coming up next?
Well, like I said, I just got back from Russia. It was one of the most.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Okay.
My internet's horrible tonight. I apologize for that.
You said you just got back from
I
Russia.
just got back from Russia. It was one of the most intense weeks of my life. The people diplomacy that I was carrying out, citizen to citizen diplomacy, is extraordinarily successful. The report I got back just this morning from one of the senior guys from the National Unity Club that I was working with, he said that it was like an information bomb went off in Russia. Everybody in Russia is talking about this visit that you just had and the things that you've done and the things you're talking about. And when he said everybody, he means everybody from number one on down. So the idea is to build upon this and see what we can do to have the voices of the people be heard by their respective leadership. But more importantly, here we are infected with Russophobia. I told you, all you have to do to get a PhD nowadays is say Vladimir Putin's a dictator. Well, he's not. But how do you get the American people to understand this? You have to go to Russia. You have to capture the Russian reality and bring it home. And so I did over 30 interviews in 7 days. Each one was filmed. And so I'm going to be starting to release these interviews on a daily basis on my Substack to help people hear these voices. And then, I'm moving forward with Project 38, which is to, extend the New START treaty so that we don't lose the last remaining arms control. It's interesting that both the Russians and Trump are sort of talking about it peripherally, but they're not coming together. And so one of my goals through all of this work is to find common ground so that we can get the Russians and the Americans together to extend this treaty so we all don't die. I'll be going back to Russia in November to follow through on this. There's, this started a process going. November is follow through to go in and get these things done. But citizen diplomacy works. It works if you just try. If you give it an effort. I would encourage people that could do it, go to Russia, meet with Russians. Or wait, if somebody offers to do a internet link up, find a community of Americans. You can find a community of Russians. Do a Zoom. Just start talking to each other. Don't wait. Talk. Get to know each other. Learn about each other. So that when you read the stupidity in the newspapers, you go, that's just not true. It's not true at all. Empowerment. The most dangerous thing in America is the empowered voter, because he can't be bought off with stupidity. He can't be told what to do because he knows better. He or she knows better. Empower yourself with knowledge and information. And let's try to stop a war with Russia. We really don't need one.
I hear you. We really do not. Scott, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.